to everybody, and thank you for coming. So thanks a lot. So I was just introducing everyone, saying thank you for coming this afternoon, and I know you wanted to say a few words, Keith, because you sent your apologies for the meeting. So I'm going to pass straight over to you.
Thank you very much, and I'm sorry I can't be there today. I had every intention, and I had every intention of standing again for the election, and wouldn't have had the need to do what I want to do today. So I really wanted to come along and say I've had a personal tragedy at home. My daughter who lived with us sadly passed away, and I'm now on duty with my youngest granddaughter, taking her to and fro school. So I can't be there, otherwise I would have been, because I just wanted you to know just how important TFSE has been to me over what now, I don't know, 7 years. And I didn't want it to pass without thanking first and foremost the board for all of the work that they put in, and beyond that the team at TFSE that have worked tirelessly through so many really important developments as we've gone through, and that was all backed up by all of the officers back in the transport authorities working together. And it was genuinely, I couldn't let it pass without saying a big thank you to all of you. Really sorry I can't be there in person today. I don't feel up to staying through the board. You've got a lot of important work. I won't take any more time, but a genuine thank you from me to all of you for the work you've done. And I'm sure our paths will cross in the future, or I hope they will. Thank you very much, Simon, and thank you for chairing.
Thanks very much, Keith, and a heartfelt thanks and best wishes and condolences to you and your family. One thing I would like to just add is just a few words, and thanks to Rupert for really helping get this together, because it's really quite an important thing to say. When Transport for the South East was established in 2017, it was a new and untested partnership. What gave it confidence, direction and credibility from day one was the leadership of Keith Glazier. As our founding chair, Keith has been constant presence around this board table, guiding TFSE from its earliest days into the respected organisation it is today. He brought together leaders from across a diverse and complex region and forged a new, genuine sense of shared purpose. He believed deeply in the value of pan-regional collaboration, and he made that belief real through his actions. As board members, we have valued Keith's calm authority, his sound judgment, and his ability to keep us focused on the long term, even when the external environment was uncertain or challenging. He is chaired with integrity, generosity, and an unwavering commitment to doing what is right for the South East. TFSE is stronger, more confident, and more influential because of Keith's leadership. That is a legacy the board is immensely proud of, and one for which we offer our sincere thanks. Right, to carry on with the meeting, this is kind of an unusual meeting because of various changes, as we can see, both for a lot of different reasons. So as we go through, there's going to be some further references to the changing times in which we live. I've got apologies from Councillor Peter Osborne, Councillor Alexander Winning, Councillor Trevor Mutton, Councillor Matt Boughton, Councillor Sophie Cox, Richard Leonard and Shamal Ratnanyaka. You may, and also Councillor Osborne has asked me to just sort of mention to the board that he has submitted a letter via the chair, and he's provided written comments on papers that have been circulated. Several points he raises will be addressed under their respective agenda items during the meeting. He confirms that he is content with all other papers, including the financial update, the planned discussion on constitutional arrangements in light of LGR and devolution at the scheduled July board meeting. So I just want to thank all members for their contributions so far. It's really been an important piece of work. In particular, thanks to Keir head of our programme and policy, who's given 2 years of dedication to TFSE, and he will be leaving us at the end of the month on his as his secondment concludes and heads back to DFSE. So huge thanks to you, Keir, for all that you've done for us here. And also to Councillor Sophie Cox, who sent her apologies. She'll be standing down as District Borough Representative on the TFSE Partnership Board. So thank her for her contributions as well. And I would also like to add thanks to Joy, and this is your last meeting. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say as a sort of final.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, even despite the amount of reading material. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
I'll just hand over to Rupert.
Could I just add, Chairman, that Joy has chaired our Audit and Governance Committee for a good many years now, and we're extremely grateful to the input and the chairing and all of the members on the Audit and Governance Committee. It made a huge difference, and it's one of the mechanisms by which we give assurance to the board, and I'm really grateful for the way in which you've led that.
Yeah, I'd add my huge thanks in that respect as well. Really important. Also, some other changes may be happening. So, as elections coming up, so Lulu, you're standing for election?
I'm standing again
For Hampshire, but so the outcome of elections may affect who's around the table. I'm sure there are other changes that could well be happening. I just wanted to, Dan, is there anything you wanted to add at the moment from your position?
Yeah, I'll perhaps come back in the main meeting just to talk a bit about future and working with TFSC and so on. But I think there were just a few things. I think first of all, I don't know if Keith is maybe no longer on the call, but I would just want to put the sort of the department's thanks on record as well, because you know, he's been an excellent person to work with, and you know, we've always found him sort of both knowledgeable and clear and sort of straight up, and you know, all sort of really good qualities. So so Keith's been a great person to work with. So I'll just put my thanks on record for him as well, and thanks for Esther. You know, in many ways, it's a shame that some of you are moving on, doing other things. But you know, best of luck in that, and we'll perhaps talk a bit later on about, you know, working with TFSC as we go forwards. But in terms of the structure, you know, things change, but it's really important that there's you know, a voice for the local authorities to come together, and you know, we really appreciate what you do.
Okay, that covers the sort of general introduction, I think, to the meeting. There's a few housekeeping points. So obviously this is a hybrid meeting, so we'll keep an eye on the screen if people want to come in. Obviously make your hands available. I think it's by putting hands up and that sort of thing we can do that. And also initially it'd be great as board members speak for the first time, certainly, can you introduce yourselves and where you're from? That's really helpful for the purpose of the meeting. And also this is streamed live, so we are live online on YouTube channel, so obviously we need to be conscious of that. And if there are any technical issues online, then the chat function is available for members joining us online. If there is a problem, then to get through to the team to sort those out. Just a final reminder about the AGM, which will be on the 13th of July. To allow a sensible period of time between the elections and the annual meeting, members should note that the Constitution requires the annual meeting to be in person. So we shall consider the appointment of chair, vice chairs and other appointments at that meeting. Okay, so just one other point to add on to this. You may wish to note that the Board's approved of the Strategic Investment Plan later today. The Chair has written to the Secretary of State to request an in-person handover of both the SIP and the transport strategy, and this will be a formal constructive exchange should the Board give its endorsement at the meeting today. So that's just an extra thing to bear in mind. Okay, so moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Hopefully you've all had a chance to go through them. Is there any comments that anyone wants to make? I've got lots of shakings of heads, that's fine. So are you happy to approve the minutes of the last meeting? Okay. And there were no actions from that meeting either that we need to take forward. Are there any declarations of interest? I've got nobody indicating on that one, so there's no declarations of interest. And any statements from the public? We've got none registered. So moving on. So straight away, I'll move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the Strategic Investment Plan refresh, and I'll hand over to Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sarah Valentine, Head of Analysis and Appraisal for Transport for the South East. I'm joined by Edmund Cassidy, who's an Associate Director at STEER. The report in front of you seeks your approval of the Strategic Investment Plan. Firstly, however, noting the outcomes of the recent targeted engagement. So you'll recall that at your meeting on the 21st of July 2025, the Board approved a programme of work to refresh the Strategic Investment Plan. And this is so that the new Strategic Investment Plan reflects the outcomes of the refreshed transport strategy, and together those two documents continue to provide the best advice to government on the transport investment priorities for the region. So today feeds back to you on the recent targeted engagement and then seeks your approval of the refreshed strategy. So I'll pass over to Edmund to take you through some of the technical work.
Thanks. We've got the clicker. Thank you very much, Sarah. So just to begin with an introduction to the SIP. So as Sarah says, there was an agreement to refresh the Strategic Investment Plan, often in light of the revised need for intervention developed as part of the refreshed transport strategy, which this board approved just over a year ago. It also responds to a changing funding and devolution context since the last SIP of 2022, and an updated evidence base and policy context. It updates the investment priorities in line particularly with the missions that were developed as part of the transport strategy, and aligns the key schemes within the TFC area with each of those missions. And it recognises the need for financial realism. There is less funding, capital funding for transport investment in the UK, in the South East since the adoption of the last SIP. What the SIP doesn't intend to do is, on a scheme-by-scheme basis, develop a delivery mechanism that is for scheme promoters. With each scheme within the SIP, there will be a business case process which needs to be gone through to fully realise that scheme. It doesn't seek to duplicate local transport plans. There are a wide range of interventions at local transport authority level which will continue to be delivered and which support the outcome realisation of a lot of the interventions within the Strategic Investment Plan. And it doesn't ask HM Treasury for a considerable whack of capital investment. It identifies a number of alternative funding mechanisms, particularly leaning on moving towards a more beneficiary pays approach to funding transport investment. And finally, it doesn't present a fixed position. So the Strategic Investment Plan is developed in a moment in time. There are other work streams that TFC is leading to show the way in which the composition of that Strategic Investment Plan changes and priorities move around and respond to a changing evidence base and changing policy context. As with a lot of the work that we've done, that TFC has done in the identification of priority interventions within the TFC area, we have looked to align it with Department for Transport's transport appraisal guidance process. This obviously helps its communicability to the department and aligns it with overarching scheme development and business case processes. This diagram seeks to show that alignment. So the first 4 stages of understanding the current and future context, developing a need for intervention and developing vision and objectives were were developed as part of the regional transport strategy, which was completed about a year ago. The next 4 stages are then taken up with the strategic investment plan. So identifying and generating options, assessing those options, and then assessing and modelling the impacts of those options to ensure that we move towards a delivery plan which delivers considerable levels of outcomes for the investment that's being forecast over the next 25 years. The first component of that is the need for intervention, which comes primarily from, as I say, from the regional transport strategy. So investment is required to address the region's key transport challenges, and they are summarised here. So the need to support UK-wide economic performance, the need to support international trade and connectivity, unlocking housing and employment growth in an area where there are parts of the TFC area that have considerably higher property prices than are sustainable. Reducing regional inequality and transport-related social exclusion. Decarbonisation, so there remains, transport continues to account for 40% of carbon emissions in the southeast, the highest portion by industry, both in the southeast and across the UK. And finally, safeguarding the southeast's connectivity. So this with a particular focus on the highway maintenance backlog and alleviating weather-related delays on the transport network. We have conducted a robust assessment process to ensure that the interventions that end up in the strategic investment plan are the ones which best align with our missions, which will deliver the highest levels of outcomes for the transport for the southeast area. This process began at the left. I'll try to decipher the slightly strange font sizes. So we started off with 303 schemes, which was the number of schemes that we had in the original strategic investment plan. Through a quite in-depth process of engagement with all local transport authorities, as well as Network Rail and National Highways, we refreshed that process. We identified where there were new interventions to be included for assessment, where there were interventions which had been delivered or had been cancelled. Through that, we moved to a stage where we had 73 schemes sifted out as a result of that removal of cancelled schemes, removal of already delivered schemes, and then inclusion of those new schemes which had been identified. The final stage, stage 2, is the multi-criteria assessment. This is where we assess each of the interventions that kind of moved through stage 0 and stage 1 against mainly the missions, both in terms of alignment with the missions, but also in terms of the extent to which the schemes deliver the outcomes required to deliver the missions, as well as deliverability and economic criteria. The way in which we have presented this in the strategic investment plan, which hopefully everybody has been able to have a look at, we presented it on a mission-by-mission basis in the first instance. So we have maps setting out each of the interventions for strategic connectivity in the orange, sustainable growth in red, resilience in blue, inclusion and integration in navy, and decarbonisation in green. Down to the bottom right, this is a group of policy interventions. Now, there's a recognition that delivering all of the interventions within the strategic investment plan will not be enough to achieve our missions. And so we have a range of policy interventions which we would seek to apply appropriately at different parts of the transport for the southeast area, different scales and in different ways. So areas within those policy interventions include delivery of programs of active travel interventions, or fuel decarbonisation, or the rollout of new mobility modes across the area. The costs and benefits of interventions within the SIP have then been presented at a sub-regional level. So we have identified sub-regions based on geographies which are emerging or likely mayoral strategic authorities or ceremonial counties. Within each of these one pages, we have a map showing all of the interventions within that area. We have a set of performance metrics which set out the transport and social and environmental impacts of the interventions within that area, and then 5 kind of strategic investment priorities along the right. One of the nice things about this is that these can be almost like pullouts from the strategic investment plan to identify the kind of key priorities within each of those sub-regions. And similarly, with the missions pages, TFC will be able to show the interventions that are being identified to deliver each of those specific missions, useful for kind of monitoring and evaluation of the impacts of the regional transport strategy. Apologies. The metrics which I mentioned on the sub-regional one pages comes from the Transport for the Southeast Economy and Land Use Model, or CELAM. So this is a model which seeks to simulate the impacts of strategic transport intervention across a kind of wide and large geography. And what it enables us to identify is the change in travel patterns, volumes and mode shares resulting from interventions, as well as increases in population, employment and homes, and also actually the change in tailpipe carbon dioxide equivalent emissions from transport. The costs of the interventions have been developed to a kind of proportionate level of detail based on the detail that there is about the intervention at that time. Those cost estimates have been verified and have drawn on assumptions with the rail interventions and highways interventions from Network Rail and National Highways, and with other types of interventions from other available data sources. And so from this strategic investment plan, we expect to see the following impacts delivered. So with that 35 billion investment over 25 years, which is about 1.5 billion a year, we expect to see 35,000 additional new jobs. So that's on top of a business as usual scenario in which you've already got an increase in jobs. It's 35,000 additional jobs delivered by the SIP interventions, resulting in a 6 billion growth in gross value added. And then on the transport side, 1.4 million fewer car trips, 260,000 more rail trips, more than 1 million more bus, ferry and mass transit trips, and 1.2 million more active travel trips. This then supports achievement of a number of ambitions which was set out in the transport strategy, showing a clear kind of read across from transport strategy through to SIP. So there was a focus on better connecting residents of the Transport for the Southeast area sustainably into international gateways. And we see that with 700,000 more residents living within 90 minutes of Heathrow Airport by public transport. And that one below is 300,000 to Gatwick, similarly within 90 minutes of the airport by public transport. We have identified a programme of rail interventions along the South Coast corridor, broadly between Ashford, Hastings, Eastbourne, Brighton, Chichester, and on to Portsmouth and Southampton. And our analysis would show that this would result in a 20-minute rail journey time saving between Brighton and Southampton if that programme of interventions were delivered. There was a focus from the transport strategy on providing higher levels of transport connectivity in our most deprived areas. We see that that results in a 20,000 increase in jobs in the 25% most deprived parts of the southeast. And then finally, on decarbonisation, we see 1.1 megatons less carbon equivalents emitted between now and 2050. So this strategic investment plan has been delivered in collaboration with stakeholders across the Transport for the Southeast area. This slide summarises the leadership that the stakeholder groups have taken in the development of the strategic investment plan. So one of the groups was the Member Task and Finish group, which was a group of members from the TFSE area who provided political perspective on the development of the refresh SIP, helped us to identify the key priorities and to inform this board on the analytical process that was taking place as part of the development of the SIP. The officer working group was a group of senior officers from across the Transport for the Southeast area, providing kind of check and challenge on the analytical work, again bringing out the local priorities that we thought needed to be in the strategic investment plan and supporting the evidence base which underpinned which interventions would be included. At various points through the process, we have also had area-based engagement at a one-to-one level, so primarily at the start where we were identifying whether there were new interventions that needed to be included in the SIP, what the status of the existing interventions within the SIP were. So this took place across local transport authorities as well as with National Highways and Network Rail. Most recently, and after the completion of the original draft of the refreshed strategic investment plan, we undertook a targeted engagement period which looked to bring in feedback on that first draft of the strategic investment plan through a variety of medium. First of all, we had fireside chats with constituent authorities, including board members and senior officers. And we had meetings with delivery partners and advisory groups, a number of which are set out to the right of the slide. There was an in-depth review of the document done by TFSE's officers to ensure alignment across TFSE's wider technical programme. And then a survey was sent out with the draft SIP to invite written feedback on the document. All of the feedback that was provided, whether that be written feedback or feedback that was put forward in engagement sessions, was taken down into a kind of consolidated log, and responses to each of those pieces of feedback were made in what is now the kind of revised SIP draft. Across this this kind of body of feedback, there are these 8 kind of key themes which have come out, which I'll go into a bit more detail with over the following slides. But they were primarily focused on one side, the analytical process that had been undergone as part of the SIP, and then the content of the SIP document itself. So over these few slides, I just set out the broad changes that have been made to the SIP in response to each of those themes. So firstly, of course, there were a number of suggestions of additional schemes or amendments to be made to the SIP. What we've been really clear on doing in these situations is to take each one of those suggestions on a case-by-case basis. Each one has, each change or additional scheme to be included has been put through the same kind of assessment process which was set out in an earlier slide, stage 0, stage 1 and stage 2. And as a result of that process, I can say that all suggested amendments have been accepted and have been included in the revised draft strategic investment plan. There has been additional detail provided on the criteria within that, that kind of three-stage assessment process, setting out why it was that certain interventions were sifted out and why interventions continue to be included. The other thing to say on this is that there will be annual opportunities to introduce new schemes into the SIP, or at least the delivery action plan, which allows, through a kind of annual review process, all local transport authorities, Network Rail and National Highways, to identify additional interventions to be brought into the assessment process and included in the SIP. We do have a number of interventions included in the SIP which are not geographically located within the TFSE area. There were questions about the extent to which these schemes should be included and how they are treated from a kind of cost and benefit perspective. We've set out in greater clarity the fact that these costs are not included within the overall 35 billion kind of price tag of the SIP, but that the benefits, given that they do accrue within the TFSE area, they are included in those areas. This includes schemes like Croydon area remodelling project or Crossrail 2, the regional option, where actually quite a considerable amount of the benefits of those schemes will be felt in the TFSE area, even though the actual kind of infrastructure project will be located outside of the TFSE area. And then finally, more detail on the modelling methodology. So there is a modelling technical report which was developed at the time of the CELAM report, the CELAM development, and so that is referred to in the SIP, but also further details are provided in the document itself. And then moving on to amendments to the actual SIP, to the content of the SIP. So in the first draft, the policy interventions were listed, but detail wasn't provided on the kind of on the core components of those policy interventions. We have amended that, added quite a detailed section setting out each of those policy interventions, its core components, outcomes, and how TFSE can support in the delivery of those interventions. The SIP is now talks more to the importance of active travel, specifically providing quantification of the potential benefits of active travel and inclusion of Walk Wheel Cycle Trust as a delivery partner. Relatedly, the public health impacts of transport investment are now amplified, particularly within the inclusion and integration mission narrative, where we talk about the potential impacts on public health of transport investment, particularly through air quality improvement and increased physical activity through active travel. And then finally, more detail on funding and affordability. So we've provided greater detail on the build-up of assumptions which underpin the overall price of interventions within the SIP. So finally, we have obviously been through this engagement and feedback process. We've made changes to the SIP in response to all of that, all of that feedback, as well as developing an integrated sustainability appraisal, which assesses the scheme's impacts on sustainability goals, including biodiversity, health and access equity. There are a number of other documents which support the strategic investment plan, which were developed as part of the first SIP, and these will all be updated to increase TFSE's overall evidence base and I guess the detail around the strategic investment plan. So as well as the integrated sustainability appraisal, there is the updated MP fact sheets. So these set out each of the interventions within each of the constituencies within the TFC area, supporting engagement with MPs and helping them to advocate for transport investment in their constituencies. The story map is an interactive, zoomable, initially map, but also provides a narrative. It really tells the story of the strategic investment plan in a very dynamic and intuitive way. And then finally, the delivery action plan, which sets out the actions that need to be taken on each of the interventions within the strategic investment plan over the next 3 years, and who is taking ownership of those actions. I'll pass back to Sarah now.
Thanks very much, Edmund. The final draft SIP itself is Appendix 3 to your board report. The integrated sustainability appraisal is Appendix 4, and the first 2 appendices deal with some of the engagement that's around. So you hopefully have had a chance to read all of those. Before we just move to the recommendations, I'd just like, if I may, to take a moment to add some thanks of my own, having been responsible for the SIP from TFSE's perspective. This board agreed a hugely ambitious programme last July to update the SIP in 9 months. I think at the time we were a bit panicked, but it really has been a hugely collaborative effort across the region at all levels, from this board and your leadership through the Member Task and Finish group, through to your officers' time in helping us and really going into detail with Edmund, as he said, around those interventions. And we really couldn't have done it without you. And I'd just like to thank everybody for their commitment to stick to that programme, and here we are today. So the report, as I said, the recommendations are for you to note the outcomes of the recent targeted engagement, and then to agree the refreshed strategic investment plan and its associated integrated sustainability appraisal. But we're obviously happy to take any questions before you do.
Thank you very much. I've got some hands going up, so I'll take questions and then I'll bring some comments in myself. So pass over to you, Joy.
There we are. It does go. I thought I wouldn't let this go without some comments at least, and possibly questions. I know there's an awful lot of hard work gone into it, and it was a really enjoyable read. I know people think I'm sad sometimes, but it was a really good read. It was one I didn't want to scoot past, I can tell you. I didn't do it fast. I definitely read it pretty thoroughly. But there's a few comments that I would like to make. I suppose from a parochial perspective, it was very interesting to see that the best business case to spend was actually in West Sussex, because it delivered more bang for buck than anywhere else. So that was pretty good news. But it's interesting looking at that southeastern pressure, because I thought the government had a northern agenda. And to my mind, it doesn't feel like a northern agenda. It still feels like very much a southern agenda. I want to ask a few little questions or make a few comments. I just wonder whether there's a natural limit where active travel ceases. You know, how many people are going to cycle and how many people are going to walk? Yeah. And I suppose that's also the case with rail and bus trips. And I wondered, you know, for the future, perhaps looking, if we're looking out to the future for 2050, we should think about the impact that driverless cars might have on our society. Because I personally think it'll be quite substantial. A far more effective use of cars, that's for certain. I then sort of started looking at the e-scooter trials. No, thank you very much. That would be my residents' thoughts. And I can't see how an e-scooter is healthy, because to my mind, you're not using your legs in any way, shape or form. So I can see how it's...
Active travel.
It's not an active travel to my mind. I can see that it complements certain sustainable forms, perhaps the bus or the train, but it still would be better if they walked that last mile rather than use an e-scooter, quite frankly, from a health perspective. And certainly from most of the residents that I talk to, they just see it as an antisocial behaviour most of the time. And that's not just older residents, that's younger residents as well. It's interesting, just on page 42, there's, and again, I'm perhaps, like most of us, there's general and there's a bit of parochial. I'm very parochial. This one is about the J23 enhancement priority, which is on the list for medium, and it's at Bolney, which is actually the area I actually represent, which is incredibly parochial of me. But it's interesting because that was prioritised as part of the Homes England development of 3,500 homes, so I was surprised it was medium and not low. And it's interesting, the A24 to Horsham is down as a medium, and it's still on there. I mean, it's interesting, Matt, who will be listening, and I were on the group that we've been looking at the A24 Dorking-Horsham link, and we've moved with what we call the lesser option, because the more serious option of dualling it goes through ancient woodland. And it's actually the camber around it is really, really difficult. And actually the cost of putting that dualling in would outweigh any business case benefits we possibly could see. On the resilience side, sorry, there's quite a few points. It just shows I have, if nothing else. And hopefully it might have covered some of your other points, other people's points. I raised the issue about resilience, which is really, really important. We all know it is, you know. But I suppose the issue I have with resilience, it's not just about those roads that we are signposting effectively for resilience. It's the diversion routes, because how many people are using the official diversions? They're using the unofficial diversions, and that's where the most lack of resilience is in the shires particularly. It really is putting undue pressure on particularly C and U roads. And they are the ones that are not holding up because they were never designed for traffic.
But that is a lot of sat-nav, isn't it?
Yeah, it is sat-nav. And this is, I come back to, you know, what can we do about sat-nav? Because sat-nav is the bane of the life in the rural communities. Then interestingly, page 91, figure 13, was a very good diagram showing funding. I'll just go to it so I can just talk to it. But 2020, 2024 is shown as a sum. It would have been nice to have had that split as well between what was local authority capital, what was possibly National Highways Network Rail as well, so we get a better comparison. That would have been quite useful. I'm nearly finished. And then I got down to page 115 talking about air quality. And interestingly, what we're seeing is that many air quality points, particularly at junctions, where there has been an air quality problem. In fact, there isn't an air quality problem anymore. You know, in changes and improvements in car and diesel, lorry and bus technology has meant that air pollution has diminished quite significantly, certainly in the terms of the way we used to measure it. So whether in fact there is newer measures in terms of particulates that might be in the air, and whether those are still issues there, they're actually being removed, some of these air quality control areas. So I just wonder whether air quality is as significant an issue. Secondly, because of technology as much as anything else, you've only got to just think about basic, you know, Enviro 6 plus buses, you know, there's hardly any diesel coming out of those at all. There was a comment about making the most of brownfield sites. Well, as I was having a conversation with someone from the South Yorkshire Pension Board yesterday, we were never industrialised down in Sussex. So we don't really have any industrialised brownfield sites to actually do anything with. And I suspect that is the same for Hampshire, Surrey, Kent, and various locations. So brownfield is a real scarce resource down in much of the southeast, I would argue. I don't want to say it's not just environment, which is a significant issue for many of us with the South Downs National Park running through it, in terms of, you know, the dark skies, etc., etc. But we've also got, down particularly on the south coast, as soon as we start work, we hit archaeology, which really does delay or cause issues. It'd be interesting to know the true extent, well, I do know the true extent of the issues on the A27 at Arundel with archaeology particularly. And on page 161, very last comment, don't forget. 161, let's just go to it, so I've got it. Sorry, I'm just literally pulling it up as I'm going along. Yeah, the ones that are rated red, which is in the strategic connectivity missions, are those just going to be too difficult, full stop, ever? The ones that mostly red. And I suppose there I particularly pick up, you know, things like the A27 Arundel, A27 Tangmere, A27 Lewis. Are going to just be too difficult, full stop? And therefore, do we put them to one side, acknowledging the fact they're always going to be too difficult, and just actually try and make minor improvements? I think that a discussion about those needs to be. There is a number of them. It's not just those, but those particularly stick out, don't they? And that was really my final sort of. Sorry, it was a long tribe, was it? Sorry, I just thought I'd make some comments.
Thanks very much. That was quite a list of stuff. It's probably worth. Do you want to come back on a few of those points now? And I've got a couple of things to say as well, if that's all right.
Yeah.
And then we can move on to more questions, because there's quite a lot in what was said there. So I think that might be best. That's fine. That's what we need.
I mean, firstly, thank you very much for reading it in such detail. It's always a pleasure. I think sometimes we write these things, we're never quite sure how much light of day they see, but it's really good to know. Obviously, a number of points, possibly some of them not necessarily Transport for the South East, but working together as a round. I mean, sort of the active travel, driverless cars, e-scooter side of things, obviously we have work streams that have looked at those in the past and will continue to do so in the future. The e-scooters in particular, obviously they are currently part of a regulated trial, but that doesn't mean there aren't illegal ones out there. So, you know, there are a number of issues around that, and I think, you know, any learning we can get from those trials would be very good around that. Your last point about the A27 schemes, we do have another piece of work, which I think here we'll probably mention a bit later on, around looking at how funding and financing can help to bring forward that programme of work. You know, we know people have tried for years and years to try and get that corridor sorted, and you know, there's lots of stumbling blocks, so there is a piece of work that comes in on that. The air quality, was that in relation to the ISA, or was it within the SIP? I don't know. Yeah, so it's within the air quality. I mean, yeah, air quality, as you rightly said, it's not just about the carbon dioxide. There's the particulate matter from the tyres, the braking, all those kind of things as well. So that does come that. And yes, again, resilience, I think we've trying to determine with our constituent authorities where we sit on resilience, what our role is and what your role clearly is, and we don't want to tread on toes, but we want to support. And I think resilience again is another piece of work that as we move forward through the next year, there'll be more work on that to try and deliver it. I think, you know, the SIP contains an awful lot of things, the policy interventions as well, and we need to take stock and work out how we work together to best move some of those things forward. So.
I'm sure we'll all say that resilience is particularly one of our biggest issues in terms of, you know, we don't have that many major roads. And, you know, when you close one...
I've got Rupert wants to come back on a couple of points there as well.
I think it's just worth saying, I mean, it's a point for all of us really. The strategic investment plan gives us the opportunity to you know, follow through on the transport strategy refresh that we agreed back in October. And this is where it becomes quite important. So your bit about is money going north, is it going south? This provides us the opportunity to coalesce around a series of interventions that are driven predominantly by you know, support and advice from your teams in the local patches. Gives us the opportunity as a collective group of authorities to coalesce around a strategic investment plan to put the point that you're making, Joy, straight into government. You know, we have the DFT around the table. I think that Our view, and your view perhaps, should be this is our advice to the Secretary of State on the things that need to happen in our patch to drive and facilitate economic growth, to support some of the housing pressures that you've highlighted around Horsham, around Chichester, you know, and those are, everybody will have their own example across the region of those pressures. This is exactly the sort of thing that leaders in the South East can get behind, to speak with that collective voice to government, to start to influence the next control period, the next RIS, to make sure that the South East is punching above its weight when it comes to those funding decisions. Because we all know that we have seen schemes cancelled in the South East, and the point that you make, the problems don't go away. And we can tinker, we can continue tinkering with some of these problems for the next 25 years, but it's not fundamentally going to solve the problem. And what you have with the SIP is an evidence base that allows you to speak with authority to government on the things that you need to see in order to facilitate economic growth.
I think there's an assumption that the South doesn't need as much money, hence why you've got, you know, I think it's 40 million from Hampshire going north of our council tax. So, you know, to help fund the northern... I'm sorry, I'm playing a bit of a political... You know, we are in a position where we're almost acting partly with our hands tied behind our backs.
And if I may, Chair, this is exactly why we need this evidence base that Edmund and Sarah have just run through to enable us to collectively make the case. And I think, you know...
It does. It does. But, you know, what we just said about the money, that's why that 2024 in slightly more detail would have made the point about how much is local, how much is coming from government. And, you know, and how many, you know, if you think about how many major schemes have gone in, there's not that many major schemes that have really gone in, certainly not sort of outside of London itself.
That point you make on the funding, if I could perhaps ask Stephen to come in really quickly, it's more difficult than you would like to think to get that breakdown. And I know we tried very, very hard, but the way that the figures are published, the way that it's recorded, makes it incredibly difficult to get the breakdown in the way that you would like. But we did try.
As Sarah mentioned, we can provide a bit more of a breakdown, but it's wanted to compare apples with apples. So the data set's about regional spend, but they're government office sort of statistical regions, so there are parts of the South East that are excluded, and actually some of those have received large amounts of capital investment through schemes like East West Rail. So that's a challenge on using some of those data sets. And then also trying to bring together local authority expenditure, national highways expenditure, Network Rail. There are two main regions that cover the TFSC areas, Wales and West. Geographically, by area, most of that's outside the TFSC area. Even southern region, some of that Dorset, parts of Dorset were within that. So we have as accurate a position as possible. If it perhaps a sort of delegated point, we can look at to see if we can further break it down, appreciating that. But there are challenges, as I said, of
I understand. I'm not being critical. Perhaps just the local authority spend would be quite useful within it. So we understand how much the local authorities have contributed, because my concern is things get tighter and tighter. There's going to be less available capital from the local authorities, potentially, or for those that go mayoral, there might be some extra capital going forward. Do you see where I'm coming from?
local authority outturn expenditure and capital is definitely a data set we have.
So just before we move on, can I just come back and ask you a question about the things that you've covered there? Is there anything that you feel that, I mean, bearing in mind that the SIP is an active document, it's iterative, it's going to be moving and changing over the next, is there anything in there that you feel that might affect our recommendation decisions at this stage?
No, I just wanted to sort of say, you know, to give some thoughts to it, actually just some comments for future thought process, like the driverless car issue, for example. And it was really just to make some comments about, you know, some of the issues that we face, and some of the comments about things that are promised that you suddenly find are extended further and further out, despite the fact there is substantial housing, for example, going in. And that is just going to make things worse in the short to medium term, yeah.
No, that's really helpful. I just wanted to add in, just on the back of your comments, I'm going to open up for more questions in a moment. Just on the Medway experience, I mean, a couple of things that you raised which are absolutely crucially important. We've just got figures in Medway around our bus and our cycle journeys. Pre-COVID, there were some 9 million bus journeys made a year within Medway. Over COVID, that dropped significantly. It's now up to about 7 million now. It's on its way back up again. It'll be 2028 before we get back to the 9 million. So that growth in bus journeys is continuing, and I imagine that's reflected across the whole region. Cycling again is equally on the up. We're putting in cycleways through our local transport plans and stuff like that, and that is actually making a significant difference in the number of people cycling. So the figures are going back up to what they should be, if you like, and then hopefully beyond. And just on the air quality issue, absolutely. Within Medway, we've got 4 AQMAs, air quality management areas. One of those is now coming out because of the air quality improvements in the area around where that was implemented, which is incredibly exciting and a change in things, so we can look at the policies in that part of our urban area as different because of the results of what's been done over the last few years to get there, if you like. So it is an exciting time of improvement and change. So there's some positives there.
Sorry, I moved over here. Just one point for me, Simon, and it may be just positioning or context of it. I think the document reads really well. It's an enjoyable read overall. I just wonder if we've landed what we mean by 1.4 million fewer car trips. Because I think people, when they're looking at the credibility of the document, will look around and not see the number of cars declining around them. You know, and the schemes in and of themselves are not changing the planning to a 15-minute city or whatever the terms are that drive lower car utilisation. Now, it may be that the interventions that we're doing are reducing the growth in some of the car trips, or they're reducing the distance of the car trips, so that you're driving to the local station rather than driving further. I just wonder if there's a way that we can position the reduction in car trips. I mean, we say 1.4 million fewer car trips each weekday, and I'm not completely convinced that that won't undermine the whole document if we don't just get the illustration of the words as to exactly what we mean. I mean, is it less car miles? I don't see any evidence anywhere that the number of cars and trips are reducing, unless you're in a city area where the planning is very much driving out the use of cars. And if we look at the planning developments we have with new garden cities, etc., they're likely to increase car trips. So I think something that lands as a consequence of the schemes and describes just precisely what we mean about that would give the document, for me, more credibility. But it's quite a high-level point, but the whole document reads really well, and I think I understand what we're saying, but I'm not. I find it a bit less convincing.
Yeah, so it's about having mainly public transport interventions in the SIP, which therefore stimulate a shift in mode for some of the trips that where people could either go by car or take a bus or take a train. Through improvement in the public transport that's available, we'll see that switch in trips. But I completely take your point that that's not necessarily clear in the phrasing of that metric, and I think that could be a kind of small change which could much better frame what that actually means. I think it's something around fewer car trips as a proportion of the overall transport demand, or something better than that. But yes, this is something which explains where those trips are going. They're not disappearing. It's not that people aren't travelling anymore. It's that more people are using public transport modes rather than the car. Does that help the framing, do you think?
I think it could do. I think we just need to be really precise about what we mean, whether it's less car mileage as a result of that trip, as a result of the intervention, even though the general car volume with GDP is going up.
Yeah.
So I think, and it is quite a challenging one to think about, because it's a sort of almost if you build it, they'll come type scenario, isn't it? What you're doing is you're providing better public transport choices, and people, as a result of those public transport investments, make a choice to go, I'm not going to get my car, I'm going to get public transport. Now that is you can make an estimate of what that you can put a quantum around it, but there are ifs and buts. There still has to be a choice that a person has to make in order to make the switch between public transport from their car. And I guess that's the challenging bit, is until you make that investment, you won't know for sure. But what I would say is there's quite a lot of evidence around that says, for example, if you put bus priority measures in, that people will opt to take the bus because it is quicker than sitting in a traffic jam, because they're shooting past on the bus lane while everybody's stuck in a car. So there's lots of evidence to show that when that investment in public transport is made, people will make that choice. But you've sort of got to put a bit of faith in making the investment. And I guess what the evidence does here is give decision makers the confidence to put that faith in investment in public transport, because people will make the switch, and we've got evidence from previous schemes that show that they do. That's a rather long-winded way of saying, I understand the point that you're making, and we'll have a look at how we express that better in the document. And I hope, Vince, in the way I've just described it, that makes a little bit more sense.
And I understand the theory. It's just that at a strategic level, we say 1.4 million fewer car trips. And it may, unless we describe that very precisely what we mean, it may undermine the credibility of the document. Because I don't think people would generally see that as being likely. But I think what we're saying is 1.4 million car trips avoided, reduction in growth or something else like that. But it's not in and of itself going to reduce the total number of car trips. I think it's just, for me, it's just a credibility point. And I'm sorry to labour it. It's not the data is wrong, the detail is wrong. Is the report credible with that statement in that way?
It's something I feel really strongly about and regularly have a pushback to my officers about. Active travel is a great thing, and I think we recognise that, but it's also a generation away. We're planning for it, we're encouraging people to use it, but as Vince has already said, saying 1.4 million reduction on the road, it's not happening yet. Most households have 2 mortgagees, and one of them is going to take the children to school and then go on to work. They're not going to cycle the kids to school or walk them to school. They're going to drop them off on the way to going to work. So we're in a sort of transitional period at the moment, and I think we need to recognise that. With all the best intentions for all these plans to go in for active travel, cycle lanes, there's a huge educational piece to be done, because quite often I have residents in my patch where we put an active travel cycling pedestrian route in, and they say, what the bloody hell's that? Nobody's using it. Why have you spent the money doing this? So I think, it's interpretation, it's about emphasis, but it's also about, in education. We're just not there yet. And, we're doing everything we can to be in that right frame of mind, but people have got to make that jump in due course, whether it's, driverless cars or whatever. So that would be my request on this one, is try and take people with you, try and help them understand what it is we're trying to achieve with this, with all the best intentions in the world.
I think I've just reminded myself about, in terms of the SIP, just a bit of Vince's point, and I'll come on to yours, Lily, the 1.4 million car trips there would be 1.4 million more car trips if it weren't for the SIP. And the SIP is saying if you put those investments in, there'll still be growth in car use for all the reasons you've just described. People will still get in a car and take the kids to school and all the rest of it. But without the SIP, it will grow by a further 1.4 million. And what we're saying is if you implement all the stuff in the SIP, you're still going to get growth in cars, but it'll be 1.4 million less than it would be if you did nothing. And hopefully that's a better way of explaining it. Thank you, Kit.
Rupert, you've put that exactly better than I was trying to describe it, and that's exactly what I was trying to say.
Between us all, we got there.
We can be clearer. We can be clearer on that within the document and express it. Someone can craft it far better than I've just said it.
Yeah, exactly. I think those numbers are in relation to business as usual. So there's a business as usual scenario, which is, as Rupert said, grows the car trips, and we're saying it's 1.4 less. I think we can, using the business as usual terminology, which is the technical side of things, we can definitely craft something that explains that. Yeah.
Okay, I've got a quick comment from Dan. We've got somebody online who wants to come on.
Yeah, apologies for jumping the queue. There's online, I need to go in a minute, so I just wanted to just take a brief opportunity. This is slightly out of order. It's not particularly about the SIP as such, although I think a really well put together document, albeit it's not for me to comment on the detail, but a really good evidence base and all the things people have said about that. I just wanted to just say a brief sort of comment about, we talked about changing futures and the work of TFSC going forward and the sort of position of the department. So, you all understand the funding position, and I think everybody's clear on where that is, and that there won't be central sort of core funding from the central government for sub-national transport bodies beyond this year. But we're still really keen to work with sub-national transport bodies / collaborative organisations in regions. They could have different names. It doesn't really matter. It's the function that's important. And we still really see the value in working with a collaboration of local authorities in a region. And we're continuing to do so. I mean, there was just the other week, there was a good example where our local transport team, who are putting together the local transport plan guidance, something we've often talked about, wanted to get some sort of input from local authorities, and we suggested they engage with a sort of collective of the STBs, and I think it was Mark from your team, wasn't it, with a couple of other ST representatives, put together a really good sort of return to the policy team in the department. So we're still really keen to work with STBs, so are National Highways, which I know he can't be here today, but I've heard him talk and say the same. So it's really important, and we really sort of value the opportunity to work with you. And we all know where the funding position goes, but I think it's just important for you to understand that we still want to work with regions collaboratively in whatever structures work best for you, and it might, exactly how they look may change, be slightly different in different geographies, but working with a collective is still a really good thing. So we're still really keen to do that. So I just wanted to sort of let you all know that before I had to scoot off, and apologies for jumping the queue on the questions.
No, thanks so much. And I've got Paul online who wants.
Thank you for letting me in. One of the things I was going to raise was talking of the 1.4 million fewer car journeys each day. I'm wondering how that relates to more people now working from home. When we looked at data 6 months ago, the data showed us that more people were using their vehicles for leisure rather than for going to work. And I'm just wondering whether we are seeing a modal trend, people working from home, people working like we are today by talking to one another through social media. And I'm wondering how that is impacting on the figures. We've got growing older demographics. A lot fewer people in work as they were doing pre-lockdown. And I'm just wondering how that machination really is impacting upon why we use our vehicles.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Firstly, I think just some clarity around those figures. So the 1.4 million that's being referred to a lot is a figure that's come out of the modelling. So it's a predicted. It's also, as we've just said, in comparison to a business as usual scenario. So that business as usual scenario contains the government's estimates of growth over the next 23, 25 years that the SIP is out for. So there is growth built into that, and that's based on the government's predictions of that growth. So just to be clear, that the 1.4 million is a prediction against some assumptions on growth as well. In terms of your comments around the working from home, later on in the agenda, under the Analytical Framework item, we've actually provided some regional travel fact sheets that have been developed following on from the Regional Travel Survey. And those do have a nice little graph, rather handily on the bottom pages, around the changes in commuting since COVID and whether people are indeed travelling more or travelling less. And there is a variety of positions across the geography as well. So we do know from that first survey what people's travel habits have been in changing. We also know, from the government figures as well, that those again are still settling down. There's changes in those periods. So in terms of sort of the evidence that we're looking at when we're doing our work, we are taking into account those changes. But just to be clear on the 1.4 figure, that's a modelled, predicted figure. So there's slightly different things.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, have I got any other comments from?
Healthy streets. Is there anything, we haven't managed to find anything in the report about healthy streets. This is something that's sort of coming up now as officers are looking at air quality, improved sort of conditions within a retail environment, better use of, inner city spaces and towns and things. Is it something we can bring in, just mention, or?
Sorry, that falls into the category of where we've categorised schemes into things that are more local transport plan, deliverable, LC whips, those kind of things. That kind of guidance is more appropriate to those kind of schemes. So that's probably why you're not finding too much of a reference to it. That said, we had a Centre of Excellence webinar only this week around helping your transport officers navigate some of those challenges around conflicting design guidance. For example, if you try to apply all the different bits of guidance for highways, for buses, for cyclists, you need American-sized streets to fit it all in. So how do you therefore, do you just do nothing because you can't fit it in, or do you actually, make some adjustments and say, well, we can make these things? So that was run last week. It's available on the Centre of Excellence if any of your officers or yourself wanted to have a look at it. And that definitely referred to the Healthy Streets thing as well. So.
Thanks very much. Anything else? Just a couple of additional points. I've got a hand up. Apologies.
Peter Candlish from Portsmouth.
Yes, we can hear you, Peter.
Fantastic. So it is basically expanding a little bit on the conversation we had about the 1.4 without directly addressing it again. I was trying to flick through the report to see if we actually recognise, just without providing endless pages of breakdown, we recognise that listening to this conversation, there is a difference between urban and rural settings, and actually there's suburban, which is, by definition, sort of halfway in between. In Portsmouth, we have, we put in a big investment in public transport. We have seen a big increase in usership as a result, including fare-paying passengers who are effectively abandoning their cars to use public transport because the issues of things like congestion are getting so bad in the city. But I would well understand that a different dynamic would be applying in other areas within the TFSE. We've also got the situation where we are a small city next to other cities. So we've got intercity bus routes going, which are also doing very well. So I wonder whether actually what the 1.4 also needs is just a sentence demonstrating understanding of that this will play out differently according to the natures of the area, because we're asking. This is a TFSE request for the whole region, so it can't deal with the intricacies of any particular place, but it has to recognise that those differences are certainly there. I would have a much more positive story to tell about rentable scooters and e-bikes, although I have the same generational issue. My younger residents who respond less well in surveys really appreciate them because they can't afford anything else, and that's how they get about a congested city. So it's really the point of the different horses for different courses that I would like to make sure we reflect.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid comment. I think, yeah, the 1.4 clearly needs a bit more context around it. It's the slide and the page from the SIP it came from is the big picture, if you like, across the whole region. The breaking it down by sub-region attempts to do that a bit more locally, but then obviously beneath that there is a whole other layer. And I think the transport strategy itself was also very good at recognising its different solutions for different places. There's not a one-size-fits-all here. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Any other comments at the moment? Just a couple of points I was going to reflect on, and actually picking up that point, Peter, as well, just with going back to the Medway experience we've got. On one hand, we've got a Safer, Healthier Streets programme underway, which is incredibly successful. Quite controversial, actually. We've got two schemes. We've got school streets, which we've been rolling out, which have been brilliant and work really well. School streets where they exclude that. And it's working around our schools. Congestion has dropped dramatically, as has air pollution. And equally, red routes are working. That's quite a tough one to introduce, but it's working, and the bus times through the main urban centres has gone up, the reliability of buses as a result of that. So those measures are difficult. What we haven't done and made a positive decision is no congestion charging. That is just one step beyond at the moment that the community would put up with. And you have to make those political decisions in that context as well. I think also in terms of the process of how we manage, we've got an allocation of over 24,000 homes for Medway over the next 15 years. There is no way we can cope with the congestion that will generate unless we take public transport incredibly seriously and go for those bus numbers increasing as much as we possibly can. So, and I think most urban centres and even the rural areas are in the similar boat. As the housing developments happen, we do not want the traffic numbers to increase at the same rate, because that would be unsustainable. So I think we are faced with these challenges all the time. Different point slightly is around the role of this SIP in terms of its ability to generate investment. If you look, I mean, we're all facing this global situation of prices and full fuel prices and the uncertainty of the economy as a result, all that kind of stuff going through the roof. And LGR is creating the similar uncertainty. If you've got a solid plan with costings and targets and everything else in place that's agreed collectively by all of us, the investors love that, and they will come in because it's there with government support and backing. And just to note, as I mentioned at the start of this item, that Keith is taking this, once we've approved it and recommended it, he's taking it to the Minister to show that we've got that solidarity, if you like, of approach to how we do that. And that's what really the investors absolutely love that. So I think the positives around this are outweighing anything of that. I mean, we can make those adjustments, wriggles. The iterative process can be continuing, but we've got the solid basis of this.
Chairman, might I ask if members would delegate to me those minor changes to make rather than coming back to committee?
Is that agreed? Thank you. Have we got any other comments at this stage? Are we happy to take it to the recommendations then? Okay, so we've got two recommendations. So note the outcomes of the recent targeted engagement, and secondly, agree the refreshed SIP and its associated integrated sustainability appraisal. Are colleagues happy with that? Thank you very much, and a huge thanks to Sarah and to Edmund and to the whole team behind this. This is a huge piece of work, and it is a really massive step forward for this board and for TFSC. So thanks to everybody who's played a part. We've heard a lot of comments about thanks. I'll add mine to those as well. Right. Okay, and that's fine. A couple of people can head out if they want to. That's fine. I think that's it's huge, actually, to be honest, what we've just done. So that's brilliant. Moving on to item 6 on the... Oh, do we need to take a comfort break? We're happy to do it. We've been at this well over an hour. No. Everybody comfortable?
There is tea and coffee if people want
Yeah,
to.
shall we just take a few minutes comfort break? It's an hour and 20 minutes into the meeting, so it'd be helpful. Yeah, we'll take a few minutes. Come back in 5 minutes.
Great.
I'm going to call everyone back in because we've got it. That's, I'm talking too much as well, so there you go. Okay, conscious of time as well, and we've got quite a fair amount still to get through. So item 6, the technical call-off on contract extension. I'll hand over to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just to note that our consultants have now left the room. That was the reason they've left, is because this next decision involves them. So the purpose of this report is to update the Partnership Board on the performance of the technical call-off contract, and also to propose that the contract be extended for an additional 12 months with additional value of 2 million. So the background to this is that, as set out in our business plan, which you approved last December, TFSE has a continuing ambitious and evolving technical work programme, and the range and scale of the work is diverse and specialist in nature, and therefore technical support is required from consultants to support its delivery. Back in March 2023, the Partnership Board agreed that a technical call-off contract was required. Previously, each element of work had been commissioned separately, involving a lot of TFSE officer time and also time of the officers of the host authority from their procurement teams as well. In July 2023, the Partnership Board awarded a call-off contract to the consortium led by Steer and their supply chain partners, including Atkins, Arup and City Science. The initial contract was for 2 years, but that was then extended via an allowed for modification in 2025, and the contract therefore currently runs from July 2023 until July 31st, 2026, with a value of £4 million. Just also to note that this is a decision that the board cannot delegate, and so having previously agreed to award the contract, the Partnership Board are now invited to agree whether it should be extended. In terms of our future needs, the business plan that you agreed at your December meeting sets out a significant programme of work for the transition year to ensure that TFSE is in the best possible position to support its LTAs through this sort of period of uncertainty. And we have received notification of £1.5 million of DFT funding for that business plan. With the end of the current contract term approaching in July 2026, we now need to make a decision on whether to extend the current contract, whether to re-procure a new contract, or whether to try and procure each piece of work individually. Alongside this is obviously we are in very uncertain times with local government reform and devolution processes, and also the uncertainty of TFSE funding beyond March 2027 when the DFT funding ceases. I think, in short, there's a very large technical programme to deliver to secure the funding of TFSE, but that is being delivered in a very uncertain time when the future governance and funding environment are not known. In terms of the performance of the existing contract, since July 2023, we have managed to commission 52 separate pieces of work through the contract with a total value of nearly £3.5 million. And having the contract in place, as the board determined, has a number of advantages. First of all, the time saving and resource saving for both TFSE and East Sussex County Council as host authority staff in running separate procurement processes for each of those pieces of work. It's also made us able to deliver a huge amount of technical work, not only getting that technical work done, but that also allows us to deliver against our budget in a more timely manner, and our carry forward has reduced year on year since we've had the call-off contract in place. It provides an opportunity for us to be able to bring the supply chain in much earlier to help shape the work, and that's especially helpful when the work is of a specialist nature or outside the direct experience of the team. The contract itself is managed at both an individual project and an overall programme level as well. The framework oversight really ensures the most efficient resource of resources, makes sure we link up the different pieces of technical work, and also make sure that we can land it as well as it needs to within the wider landscape that which subnational transport bodies operate. Value for money is ensured. Each task proposal is agreed by TFSE officers before work commences, and this includes cost programme deliverables. The rates that we are charged are set through the ESPO framework, through which the call-off contract was originally tendered. And over the course of the contract, £362,000 of social value has also been delivered across the region. In terms of the options, tendering each worst task separately has been discounted on the grounds of cost and resource efficiency for both TFSE and our accountable body. The rationale behind having a call-off contract 3 years ago still stands. Reprocuring a new framework provider from July onwards could present two major risks. Firstly, delivery of the 26-27 programme could be compromised. Either work is not able to be completed before expiry of the existing contract, or work can't start until after a new contract is in place in August, risking then that's its completion within the current financial year. Additionally, to have a new contract would require the drafting of a contract specification, and without clarity on the nature and quantum of work to be procured, given that we don't know funding beyond March 27, we don't know quite how the devolution and local government landscapes fit, there is a risk that any new contract may not actually be fit for purpose and wouldn't deliver desired outcomes or value for money. In short, the current contract is performing well. Measures are in place to effectively manage the contract and the work programme, and that ensures value for money and the delivery of high-quality outputs, as we've hopefully just seen through the SIP. I've had discussions with the host authorities' procurement and finance teams to discuss potential options, and this has indicated that there is an option to extend the current contract, both in time and value, via what's known as the implicit modification. If you were to choose to do that, it doesn't commit any expenditure, it just provides the opportunity to commission work subject to funding being available. I think, in short, extending the current contract for a further 12 months provides an efficient means of delivering the technical work programme through a period of great uncertainty. It provides stability, it maximises the knowledge and experience gained from the operation of the contract too far. If you were to choose to do so, this would take the current contract term up to the 31st of July 2027. Reprocurement of a new contract, which would take around 6 months, would then start in early 2027, by which time, hopefully, the position with local government reform, devolution and TFSE funding will be clearer, and proposals would be brought back to this board for their consideration at that time before any work started. So the recommendation is to note the performance of the contract with Steer and the ongoing need for support to deliver the technical programme through a period of uncertainty, and therefore to improve an implicit modification for the extension of the current call-off contract for an additional 12 months and an increase in value of up to a further £2 million.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Are there any comments on this? I've got nobody around the room. Is there anybody online? I can't see online. No. Okay, brilliant. In that case, shall we move straight to the recommendation? Yeah. Are colleagues happy to recommend this? Agreed? Okay, lovely. So moving on to item 7. This is about our constitution and amendments necessary, particularly in light of the local government reorganisation devolution. So I'll pass straight over to Rupert.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. So this is really a framing paper that recognises that the local government environment is changing over the next, well, likely to change over the next 6 months. We know that the Sussex and Brighton Combined Authority statutory instrument is laid, is likely to be made soon, as is the Hampshire and Solent statutory instrument for that combined authority. That is now laid earlier this week, and I would imagine will be made, I suspect, probably after the election now. Who knows? We're also going through a local government reorganisation for a number of authorities, and I hope the decision will come out relatively soon on what that looks like for a number of authorities. But that means that the membership of this board will change, and the constitution needs to be adapted to reflect that. I think the most significant bits are that the combined authorities, where they exist, will become the local transport authority, and the authorities, the unitary authorities that will be formed in that area will be highways authorities. So the constitution, I'm expecting, will need to reflect those changes. It will need to reflect the new unitary authorities, and Councillor Mewton from Brighton has made the point that he's interested to know how highway authorities would be represented on the board. And I think as the board remembers, you have the opportunity to co-opt. So you could co-opt a number of highway authorities to the board should you wish. So it's really just to frame this and seek any steers or guidance in advance of me bringing a paper with proposed constitutional changes to the July board meeting. The other thing that I think the board should be aware of in relation to the combined authorities is that the Transport for the South East's current accountable body is East Sussex County Council, which will, given the statutory instrument for the combined authority is laid and likely to be made, will not be a local transport authority going forward. There's a period of concurrency, but ultimately it won't be. And given that Transport for the South East is a strategic transport body, it makes sense to make the accountable body a combined authority. And so I have sought the views in principle from the constituent authorities of the Sussex and Brighton Combined Authority as to whether they would be willing to be the accountable body for Transport for the South East when the statutory instrument goes through and they are established, and they are supportive of that approach. And I think that is sensible, given that the current accountable body will no longer be a local transport authority in time. So really it's a framing. I want your advice and feedback and to help me frame something to bring back to you in July.
Thank you very much. Have we got any comments on that?
It might be an idea if I comment now rather than on this particular item, rather than wait for the Audit and Governance Committee update. We did discuss this at quite some length, and you've quite rightly brought up Councillor Mutin's comments that he wanted delivered back to the board meeting, which is, you know, where we receive very detailed updates on the progress of the evolutions across South East. And our uncertainty around, you know, such as, you know, not just, you know, Sussex, Surrey, etc., but Berkshire as well, and other devolution LGR-related timetables, and how those may impact the TFSE's governance programme delivery, etc., probably because different authorities have been in such different stages, and some of them will be going through transition. So it comes to really that the amendments to the TFSE constitution needs to be extremely flexible and enable to move with those developments rather than it constantly having to be updated. And I'm sure that if we undertake that in the summer of 26, so a little bit later, we'll probably have quite a bit under our belt, so in terms of known to actually then move forward. And that's what we discussed there. So, but Rupert, you more or less said other things as well.
Any other comments on that? I mean, I completely agree with that view. I mean, I think one of the things we're trying to do is, in a very uncertain world, make sure that we are a body fit for whatever changes are coming, and that's what this is about. Bearing in mind that whatever the future is going to be, there will be a need for regional transport delivery, and that's what we do. And getting us in that state to do that is what this process is about, so I fully agree. Our colleagues happy to with the recommendation that we have this paper coming in July. Okay, thank you. Moving on to finance update. Keir, do you want to come in on that one? I'll do echo there. Thank you very much.
Hello, yes, I'll try and be brief, conscious of time, and we've gone through a lot today. But yes, to give a finance update, the board paper sets out our position to the end of February 2026 and makes a final year forecast for the end of this financial year. As the paper says, at the end of the financial year, our forecast expenditure is just over £2.9 million against a budget of £3.8 million. That is, unfortunately, £280,000 less than was last forecast at the previous board meeting. However, that number has been refined as we now have final invoices from suppliers, which means the confidence rating against that budget line is increased, with most of the budget lines now virtually certain to the end of the financial year. The paper does set out a bit of detail about why some of those areas have decreased in terms of the forecast. Some of that is, as I think Sarah might talk about later, is we've done some scoping on work for Analytical Framework. That's been rescoped in light of DFT's funding decision, just to make sure that we can really get all the money out of the door in 2026-27. Some of that is on the Centre of Excellence as well, where we've taken a conscious decision to delay and defer some of the spend to April to June 26, which will basically mean that support continues at a time that in previous years support has had to be turned off. And the rest of it is because we've managed to make efficiency savings. So on communications and engagement, we've managed to underspend the budget, and similarly on areas like governance, which I think the board would welcome. It is a good news story, I think, in general. I was just checking the previous end-of-year budgets, and this is the most funding TFC has been able to spend at the end of the year. And the good news really with that is it's the most we've been able to deliver. So when you look at the quantum of work that's gone out, it's very positive, lots on the Centre of Excellence, lots on scheme development and scheme delivery, and of course the SIP and the transport strategy that were mentioned earlier. So that's the overall position. It is worth also saying, as local authority contributions have been agreed for the next financial year, invoices for those local authority contributions will come shortly in April. So just if local authorities can expect to receive those. But yeah, that's the update, and happy to take any comments or questions.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Any comments on the finances? Joy?
Yeah, I may as well do the Audit and Governance Committee update on that finance piece as well, which is just to say, yes, we reviewed the finances, we noted the reductions and the reprofiling. We did make a comment about perhaps forecasting could be a little tighter. But apart from that, we signed off the financial figures and the forecasts.
Thanks very much. Anything further? Okay, our colleagues happy? It's just asking that we note the financial position as of the end of February 2026. Okay, thank you. And just once again, thank you very much, and all the best for the future to you as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Moving on to item 9, the Audit and Governance Committee. I'll hand over to Joy, noting that you've already commented on items 7 and 8 in relation to that.
Yeah, I have, yeah. So really all I wanted to talk about is a strategic risk register. We updated that to reflect that after 26, 27, the DFT will no longer be the TFSC's primary funder. We made some changes to note the evolving governance arrangements and the outputs from the recent Transport Forum, and obviously the increasing risks relating to devolution LGR. With probably a need there for greater stakeholder engagement and clarity for those local authorities progressing MRN schemes. And those devolution updates need to be incorporated into future reporting from the DFT. We also we had a DFT provide an update on rail reform. We were very lucky Peter Duggan was able to do that, noting the progress of the railway bill through the Parliament. And we highlighted the importance of timely updates, particularly of MRN schemes and risk-free strategy. And the next steps were they noted the need to reflect updates, as I said, on devolution LGR in the March partnership papers, and obviously we've just discussed that through the governance piece. And that was it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's nice and brief. Any comments at all on that? Have you got anything online coming through of anybody? Nope. Lovely. Thank you very much. I mean, I think one of the key things in there, again, this is mainly aiming at what we've got to discuss in July, which will be quite a detailed discussion around LGR, is the role of the highways authorities within that, and we need to be looking at how that fits in. So that's an important point. But I think so July is key in terms of that. Lovely. Thank you very much. Is everyone happy on the recommendation for that? Good. Thank you very much. So, moving on rapidly now to the responses to our consultations. This is on Transport Committee's call for evidence on EV, MHCLG's response to a national planning policy framework, and the DFT proposed regulatory framework for HGV CO2 emissions. So 3 separate consultations. I'll pass over to Rupert.
Thank you, Chairman. As you rightly say, there's 3 consultation responses here. I mean, when taken together, they provide a bit of a consistent message. Actually, they reinforce some of the work that we've been doing. On EV charging, we support the acceleration, but highlight some of the practical barriers to things like grid connections and procurement and accessibility and the like. And, of course, the need to support private commercial cars as vehicles as well as private cars. On planning reforms, our response stresses the importance of properly integrated spatial planning, transport delivery and energy capacity. I think that's particularly important given the changes to the planning environment, particularly around spatial development strategies. And then on HGV decarbonisation, this is about how we support a clear zero emission mandate and firm long-term milestones to provide the certainty for both industry and investors. We're asking that the board agree those responses so we can get those off.
Thank you very much. Have we got any comments on those?
Yeah, pretty solid. So, yeah, good. And particularly on that whole, I mean, we laughed here. It's not funny really about the grid connection. It's either one, whether you can get grid connection, or two, how much it costs. I mean, we're trying to electrify our fleet, but, you know, our highways fleet, but it's impossible if you can't actually get an affordable grid connection. So it is whether you can actually get grid connection, and then it's the affordability if you can. So there's two elements to it, which I was glad to see. And obviously anything to do with water is a really interesting story, isn't it? At the moment, it's we're either short of it, we haven't got enough, or we've got too much. So.
Yeah, I completely concur with that. With similar issues, so it's really important that we get that in place. I think just from my point of view, the other one that's really key, and it's actually quite welcome to see it coming back in a new form, is on the response to MHCLG on the planning policy framework, looking at spatial development strategies. I remember the old strategic plan days, which were really good to work with because they mattered, and when they disappeared, we missed them. So this is a kind of return to that. And I think in association with that, and something else we're looking at with Canton Medway, is the regional energy strategic plans as well. That's fundamental. I mean, we've got a lot of critical infrastructure around energy anyway going on, and the rollout of all the net zero work that's happening now is so important. So to see that is brilliant. It's really good to have that. Okay, any further comments? So are we happy to note those and the three recommendations on that item? Are we happy for them to go forward? Yeah, agreed. Thank you very much.
Just to note, that's all the decision. From here on in, it's for information.
Okay, so we're into just gathering information now. So if you're anyone who needs to leave, then you're okay. We've made our key decisions for the afternoon. So thanks for that. So moving on to our analytical framework. Sarah, are you happy to come and give us the information on that?
Thank you very much. The Analytical Framework update paper is in front of you. Obviously happy to take any questions. If though, I could just draw members' attention to the Regional Travel Survey fact sheets that have now been prepared. So this breaks down some of the key data from the Regional Travel Survey into a sort of easy to digest and hopefully engaging manner. There's one for each of the sub-regions. They match the sub-regions that are set out in the Strategic Investment Plan as well. And then one for the entirety of the transport for the South East region. Alongside that, we now have the ability, obviously, to delve into that data. So if there's any of you or your officers need that data for your technical work, then do please feel free to get in touch with the team. The other thing I would just, going back to what Keir said earlier around the finance and the budget side of things, with the analytical framework, now we've had confirmation of the funding from DFT. We are working with our consultants to try to work out the most effective, efficient, I suppose, way of delivering the analytical framework outcomes that are required within the time and the budget that we have available. So a more traditional approach might have been to say we have to have X model and Y model and Z model. What we're doing is looking at what outcomes do we actually need and how, therefore, can we best get there, not necessarily building those models in their entirety, but making steps along the way. So that's a piece of work that's underway, and the July board will receive an update and a potential analytical framework route map, which sets all that out. But happy to take any questions.
Any questions on that? Don't think we've got anything on that one. Just to comment really about, I mean, obviously the key part of how important data is, we all understand that, and how important that is to all the work that we do is dependent on the data we have. But I think also, and the comment here is the TFSC offer. I mean, we become the focal point. When people want to know what's happening in the regional transport network, they will come to us. And that makes us really invaluable, going back to that future of what we are. So I think that's incredibly important. So members happy with the recommendation there, just to note the progress on that? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 12, which is again with Sarah on the delivery of the strategic investment plan, an update on the work that supports this delivery.
Thank you very much. I should have bought a special seat, shouldn't I, here today? So again, this is an ongoing programme of work to support delivery of schemes within the strategic investment plan. Key things to highlight here, over the last 3 financial years, TFSE has provided over £800,000 in funding to various schemes across the region to help them develop through those early stages. Of those schemes, I think there's 14 that we've supported. They are all now underway. We can safely say, with Rupert having signed the last legal agreement yesterday, I believe, against Gatwick. So that is really good news, and look forward to. We know that has moved some schemes along quite a lot, and so it's been really beneficial. And we'll obviously, although in the current funding environment, unlikely to be able to provide direct funding as we have done, we will be looking particularly through the Centre of Excellence, which I know Emily will talk about in a minute, as to how we can support those schemes as they continue to be delivered. The other items highlighted within the report regarding the major road network, I'm sure you'll recall there was a review carried out by DFT last summer at breakneck speed and very short notice, and we're led to believe the outcome would be published at the end of the calendar year. We are now told, as far as we know, spring, hopefully before pre-election periods, but that's obviously now getting very, very close. The other announcement we've been expecting is around the Roads Investment Strategy 3, or RIS3 as it's known, from National Highways and Network Rail, and again, the best we know is March, but again, we're getting very close to the pre-election period, so I'm afraid nothing to report on progress with those 2 items, but suffice to say we will continue to liaise with DFT and National Highways and make the case for schemes across the South East.
Thank you very much. Has anyone got any comments to make on that? Again, you keep talking about the future and the uncertainty of it, but this process is, I'm reflecting back on our SIP discussion earlier in the meeting about it's an active plan. It's ongoing, it's iterative, it has to be changing and evolving with time, and this is the thing going on behind the scenes that make that happen. So thank you very much for that. Thanks to Lulu for your time this afternoon. Moving on to item 13 on the Centre of Excellence. I've got Emily who's going to provide us with an update on where we are with that.
Thank you, Chair. Just as always, got a couple of slides to take you through just to highlight some of the monitoring and evaluation in particular on the Centre of Excellence. So today we're just talking through the delivery that we've had since February, which was the last meeting where we all met. The annual capability survey, which is now live, and the monitoring and evaluation that happened between December and February. And then we'll just touch on some of the upcoming priorities as well. So in terms of that delivery since February, here you've got some of the webinars and events that have taken place since the 2nd, which was the last partnership board. Those that are highlighted in orange will take place in April, so they aren't up until today, but everything else has been delivered. We have also got the councillor workshop there, which is just highlighted in yellow. So it was meant to take place on the 10th of March, but we have rescheduled that, so that will take place in the summer. And so the purpose of that workshop will be to try and get members to understand how decarbonisation and policy can help them outside of the usual narratives that you might hear. But as you can see, it's a delivery against the work programme that you agreed back in July 2025. So we've delivered quite a lot against it, but one of the ones that we've really seen a lot of appetite for is that first one, which was the local authority webinar. So Brighton and Hove and also Brighton and Hove and West Sussex have both delivered local authority showcase webinars, which have been really well received. And we've also got one more coming up on the 1st of May, provided by West Sussex again, which will be on active travel schemes and how they got their capability assessment improved. So really, really good to see that local authority element coming through there as well. And an animation for you all. So 13 webinars have been delivered in that period of time. On the annual capability survey, you'll remember from last year that what we did was utilise the data from that to inform the work programme. And the work programme is completely shaped by the responses. So that is currently live. It's from the 16th of March through to the 16th of April. There is a budget for 250,000 for next year. So the responses that officers contribute to the survey will directly shape how that budget is spent. So if I could just ask members around the table just to make sure that they do let their officers know how important it is to respond. And as I say, the packages of support that we'll be providing will be directly influenced by that. One of the figures just to highlight on there as well is the 70 officers was how many we reached out to last year, but we've got over 320, so hopefully we'll see an even bigger regional representation and a bigger picture of what's needed in terms of that development for 2026-27. So in terms of those timescales, just to reiterate, the survey will be live from the 16th of March through to the 16th of April. The intention is then to analyse that data quite quickly, so from the 17th of April. The presentations of the findings will then be brought back to the steering group, so those colleagues that have been on the journey with us from the beginning, so that'll be on the 13th of May. And should they be happy with that, we'll then work to develop some of the plans on a page and also the work plan as well, which will then be presented to members at the 13th of July Partnership Board so that we can then get the commissions underway, so we make sure that we've got a good pipeline throughout the remainder of the financial year. So lastly, just on monitoring and evaluation, here are some of the figures that we always present to you. This one also includes December, January and February now. So you can see that there's been 516 site sessions, 82 pieces of content have been uploaded. I'm really pleased to see as well that there's been 553,856 cost savings for LTAs. That works out at around 34,616 per local authority. But equally, across the people who have attended those webinars, that's actually just a cost of £74 per person as well. So hopefully you can see that we're providing good value for money there. There's been 23 sign-ups, so we're still seeing increase on uptake, which is really good to see. So 390 in total, with 431 pieces of content in total across the site. And also on here, you can just see the level of engagement across some of the pages. So with the components on the right-hand side at the top, you can see that the webinars continues to remain as the most popular site component. And then just underneath that, again, the Carbon Assessment Playbook, again, continues to be the most visited page, individual page. We've also got the Cadence tool on there as well. So that's another tool which is a free version, which we also have some training provided on, so that's why that one's shot up there. So hopefully your local authority users can utilise that as well. So utilising that survey completion, we'll be gathering insights to identify the priority capability support packages, which will then feed into that development work plan for 26-27, and again will be brought to you on the 13th of July. And then we'll be continuing with the resource development in the interim. So that will focus on devolution, AI and active travel, just to maintain that momentum and make sure there's not a gap in support between April and July. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Have we got any comments or questions?
Not a real question, but just to say that I think that from what I can understand, the Carbon Assessment Playbook particularly put you on the map. And I should continue to try and put yourself on the map because it really did, and that will bode well for you in the coming year, I should think.
Thank you for that. And anybody else? Just from I would totally agree with that comment there, and it'd be interesting to know, perhaps when we come back in July on this one, what are the most popular subject areas that generate the most interest. I'd be really keen to see what those are, because I think, like the carbon thing, it would certainly be high on the list. I think the other thing is this growth that we're seeing in the take-up. I think they refer to it as organic growth, as word of mouth and reputation increases, more and more people start engaging. So it'd be nice to know in, say, 6 months' time, again, what those figures are looking like in terms of engagement and stuff like that as well. But it's brilliant. Thank you.
Just to mention, Chair, that Emily will be on maternity leave in July. So it won't be Emily, but I know that she will make sure that all that is put in place to come back and update you.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Another one comment there.
Sorry, I was amused to see in the paper that we were recommended to comment on the paper, whereas I think the one on the board is actually correct.
To note the progress.
Yeah. So I think it just needs, the paper needs just adjusting for the record.
Okay.
That's a good point. Thank you very much. So reading off the thing, are we happy to recommend as per what's on the screen? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 14, the technical programme update, and I'm going to hand over to Rupert for this one.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've let Mark off the hook today. Just 4 areas I'd like to focus on briefly. EV charging infrastructure. So we've currently got a study looking at the challenges that local transport authorities are encountering with the rollout of on-street charging infrastructure. That work's nearing completion, and we'll bring the findings of that back to the board in July. And also the fleet charging mapping data that was produced for Slough and Brighton and Hove has been rolled out to all local transport authorities. So this identifies where charging infrastructure for commercial vehicles is likely to be needed and where it could realistically be located. And then on the freight logistics and gateways, we've got a new freight awareness e-training course that was being developed jointly with the Chartered Institution of Highways and Transportation. That launched in April 26, so that's for local transport authorities. On rail, we're continuing our collaboration through the wider South East Rail Partnership, and we're looking at developing a rail plan, bringing partners together at quite a crucial moment with the formation of GBR. And then on decarbonisation, we're just doing updates to the carbon assessment playbook. They're in progress now, and local transport authorities continue to receive support through, as Emily's just touched upon, Centre of Excellence workshops. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have we got any comments on the technical programme update?
I was just going to talk about, I really appreciate what's been going on the EV charging, because there is obviously, we know what our issues are, and we're really interested in what other people's experiences as well. And that also includes very much the commercial fleet charging infrastructures as well, but particularly the curbside charging. Having received yet another levy funding grant, it's beginning to sort of think about the use of it and the best use of it, combined with the fact that people would prefer to use their own charging facility because it's cheaper, but it's being able to provide it for them, given the fact we don't have lampposts that are next to the road, they're actually back from the road, so we can't do it. And pavement access is much more difficult than people actually really appreciate. So, thank you.
Yeah, I completely concur. The number of emails I'm getting from residents about pavement charging now and laying pipes and wires and everything else, the rules won't allow it, and we need to look at the rules rather than discourage people from having EV. So that's a big issue that needs to be considered. I think also the commercial thing for us, particularly in the North Kent area generally, is a huge amount of demand now increasing for our van drivers to drive, and they want to be driving electric vehicles, and the charging infrastructure is not available. So looking at how we provide that is another key thing, but that's taken into consideration, so that's good to see. Oops, sorry. So are colleagues happy with just the comments on the progress of this? Thank you very much. And moving on now to the Business Advisory Group. I've got a comment here from Councillor Osborne, who's just welcoming the report and pleased to see the strong emphasis on the international transport considerations, etc. And understanding this aligns well with the draft growth strategy, Kent and Medway in development. I understand that Gatwick Rail Services study will commence soon on TFC, soon now that TFCFE, Gatwick Airport and Network have agreed the study and funding agreement. That's just comments from Councillor Osborne, who's not here this afternoon. So I'll hand it over to Vince now to pick up on that.
Thank you. We had the last meeting held on the 5th of March. I'll start again. The last meeting was held on the 5th of March. We were pleased to welcome new members whose interest had been stimulated by last year's annual business conference, so that was good. And it was good to see that evolution in membership. I think one of the things that came across strongly by the private businesses there is that the importance of the evidence base that TFSE is building and the important role this will play as we seek for more private funding in transport infrastructure schemes in the future. And that's a really important role that TFSE are providing. But we talked about the general updates etc. And they're very closely aligned to what the strategic investment plan, in being totally honest. We talked about Gatwick a lot and the growth and the impact that's happening there. And also we updated on rail strategy and other things. There was questions about where is the integrated national transport strategy, to which we weren't able to answer. But we look forward to that in due course, no doubt. Attached to this document is our business report for 25-26. The evolution of that document is the themes in it were generated by the original membership of the Business Advisory Group. They then provided the structure for the Business Summit last year, and the report you see is a summary really of the outcome of the Business Summit plus further report. So it's an evolution of the work that the group has done, so we'd recommend that you read that. The next step, so that we're now planning on the second annual Business Summit, the team that we had in the last meeting started to consider what themes we should be looking at this time, and we reckon obviously take advice from this group. Particularly, the businesses there wanted to focus on affordability of transport, because they felt that was a key issue for their members, whether it's the price of energy, whether it's rail fares or many other things, but the affordability of transport seemed to be quite key. And also, how do we get better integration of transport across modes if we want to achieve some of our aims? So they're the initial thoughts for the next Business Summit, but we'd welcome other ideas from this group and others at any stage, now or later. And I think we ought to also thank Keir for all the advice, guidance and support he's provided, and in the last year, Jamie as well. So thank you, Jamie, for getting us to this stage. And therefore, we'd ask you to note the progress of the Business Advisory Group and approve the publication of the Business Advisory Group's 25-26 report.
Thank you very much, Vince. And have we got any comments on that? I've got Rupert.
Thank you. I think the Business Advisory Group is doing sterling work, and thank you, Vince, for your leadership over it. I just noted the bits about Gatwick, actually. I just thought it might be worth bringing to the board's attention that Stuart and I attended a round table, didn't we, last week at Gatwick. I'm not quite sure who organised it. I think it was GTR. But it brought together Gatwick Airport, Network Rail, ourselves, and was hosted by the two MPs, Mims Davis and Natasha Irons from Croydon. And it was, it's just an example of how Transport for the South East is, working with partners in the region, and it just builds upon the points that you were making about Gatwick. But I think it was, I don't know if Stuart's got anything to add, but I thought it just might be worth making board members aware that that took place.
Thanks very much. Do you want to?
I think Rupert's actually covered it pretty well. I mean, it was a meaningful conversation and valuable actually to get a business view around Gatwick, and actually it was more about Transport for South East and then actually wider into the network and how important the whole of the South East is through to the wider rail network as well. So it was a meaningful conversation.
Thanks so much. I just reiterate that point about Gatwick from a North Kent point of view. Having a better way to get to Gatwick would be fantastic from our point of view. I know it's a real challenge for residents right across the area for us, and every time there's a hold up on the M25, it all stops and the trains in and out of London. Great. So that's really welcome. I think a couple of other things. Firstly, this just compliment the clarity of this report. It's really easy to follow, makes a lot of sense. So thank you very much for that. Really helpful. I think the other thing is about the one specific thing about rural isolation is mentioned, and coastal as well as countryside. I think that's really key, and how we address that as a specific issue going forward is something that's very important. I know that certainly in North Kent you'd be surprised, but we do have some very isolated communities along the North Kent coast as well. So it's a really quite an important point to make. But thank you very much. Are colleagues happy to note the progress and approve the public? Oh, sorry, Joy.
Sorry to again talk. I just want to talk about the rural isolation. I did feel, I was there at this particular meeting, I did feel that some of the comments that were made within my group were made without actually having lived in a rural area. and actually just sort of picking up on what people obviously say or think, perhaps things they've heard, rather than actual facts, which rather concerned me. If I think about the rural communities in, certainly in the South Downs, within West Sussex, the majority of people have actually chosen to live there rather than actually have born and bred there. And they know that when they chose to live there, there's a situation they would be in with potentially public transport, etc. And it's borne out by the fact that there is obviously some of the recommendations around about improving transport and some of the suggestions which are around, for example, digital, what we call Book a Bus, for example. So that's the digital platforms to demand responsive transport booking and real-time information. We're finding the real-time information really useful, but actually, when it came to book a bus in the rural areas, I withdraw one from one area because absolutely 2 people a week were using it at thousands of pounds worth of cost. So we actually found that there wasn't a sort of demand for it. People still wanted to drive their cars and have that flexibility of it. And they knew what buses actually run. They are limited and we subsidise them. So it's just trying to put that in perspective. And the other one was they talked about community buses. And what we found with community buses, the majority of people who might use the buses tend to be people who have the pass, the free pass, and they don't want to pay for a community bus. So there are a number of issues there. But I suppose the point I'm making, and I'm not trying to belittle some of the rural isolation, but the majority do know they understand the issue when they move into that area. And that's why many of them move out when they get older. They move back in towards a market town, large village, etc. So, being on the ground and having represented, I represent partly South Downs, I live in another part of the South Downs, you sort of understand how the residents are and the way they behave. Just thought I'd make that point. I think it's something that people think that people live in rural areas, but actually it's not necessarily the case, not in all rural areas anyway.
No, and I think that's a valid point. Some of the evidence we received were areas where bus services have significantly shrunk in the last 10 years and left people isolated, where some locations have gone from half a dozen buses a day to 1 bus a week because of funding cuts and elsewhere.
No, not necessarily. It will be lack of usage. People aren't using them.
I'm just saying the evidence that we had was that some locations people have been left without bus services.
Oh, right, okay.
But the trouble with rural isolation is there is many different reasons for it. I think what was really helpful at this conference was the NHS with their plan for the next 10 years to put more services into market towns to try and help access. So I think the solutions to rural isolation might be digital connectivity, might be more services. There isn't one, I think it's like you're saying, there isn't one size fits all. No. And I think it has to be geared for the area, but there isn't immediate solutions, and the team have worked with Transport East, who have led some of the research in this area. There aren't immediate solutions if you haven't got the money and you're not prepared to subsidise it.
No, thank you. I mean, it's quite a long, we could have quite a long debate about that. I mean, we've got a similar issue, one of them, the nuanced solutions, where people were complaining that they couldn't get into hospital appointments in the town centre, and all it needed was a slight rejig of bus timetabling, and the buses were suddenly available for. It's about negotiation and nuanced changes that bring about results. So, thank you. Okay, so are people happy to take forward the recommendation on that? Brilliant. Thank you very much. So moving on now to item 16, the advisory panel on transport form update. Hand over to Jeff.
Thank you. I've sat here very patiently. That's very unusual. I mean, looking back, I went to a meeting in Brighton with all of the people representing individuals or by a group of people. I can't actually remember precisely when that was, but it was at least 6 years ago, I think. So I did not volunteer, but somebody pushed me forward or that sort of thing. So I took up the cudgel for advisory panel and transport forum. In the first few years, it was a good time to fund a new advisory panel and transport forum, and that was working very well. It's not quite as busy as it used to be, but I think there might be a reckoning for Jeff French here, because I was speaking to Rupert earlier today. In about 48 hours, I become 79 years old, and I'm rather now of the feeling that I have worked my passage, and therefore somebody else will have to pick it up and take it forward. If they ever want any advice, probably the best thing is to come and ask me, and then do the exact opposite to make sure that it was all working okay. But it's been great fun for me, but age has caught up with me. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. But I expect to have an invitation with whatever you're cooking up there as well. Okay.
Jeff, if I might just say something. We established Transport for the South East in 2017. It's 9 years ago.
Yeah.
And I can remember meeting you in this building.
Yeah.
And those of you that might not know this, but Jeff is a former president of this fantastic institution. And if anybody goes downstairs, you'll find a portrait of Jeff hanging up amongst all the other portraits of past presidents.
Thank you.
But I met Jeff in I can't remember if it was the president's dining room, but anyway, it was in this building. And at the time, I can't quite remember whether you were the chair of Enterprise M3, LEP, or just handed over the chair. But we were also, I've got to get this right, Jeff, so correct me if I'm wrong, former chief executive of Scott Wilson.
Yeah.
Which those of you that have been in the sector for a while know that Scott Wilson, very eminent firm of consulting engineers, that I think eventually bought by ACOM, is that right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. They have more money than us.
So Jeff was able to retire in luxury. I am extremely grateful to Jeff. He's been with us on this journey throughout that 9 years. The Transport Forum has provided that stakeholder mechanism, and it's evolved, it's had its moments, and I think this is a timely moment for us to think about how that works going forward. And I know if Keith were here, he would be saying, repeating exactly this, he would also be extremely grateful for the support you've given Transport for South East over the years. If I'm honest, you don't look a day over 78.
I shouldn't have given you the number.
Thank you, Jeff, from all of the team, and I know from the members, you've been an integral part of Transport for South East, and we sort of, it's a bit cliche, but we couldn't have done it without you, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Round of applause. Thank you very much. And I'll add my comments to that. I mean, we've worked together slightly less, just over a year, but it's been a real pleasure. So it's really the value of what you've brought has been great. And obviously, with the forum, we're looking forward to how that is represented as we go forward, and that still remains a valuable part of the work we do in so many different ways. So we'll be able to manage that. So thank you very much for that. Any other comments on the work of the forum? No. So our members happy to recommend to note the recent work of the forum. Thank you very much indeed. So moving on to item 17, and that's James coming forward with communication and stakeholder engagement update.
Thank you, Chair. Great to follow Jeff's presentation. And on just behalf of our team, Jeff, I think it's probably right to say thank you for all the help you've given us on the forum. before I joined anyway, particularly, but I know you've been a big part of what we've done as a team over the past few years, so thank you for that. Just to mention, Sarah's already spoken about the regional transport survey, but that's something that we've been working on with Sarah's team for a while. It's now out there live in the open, so just to reiterate what Sarah said, if any officers are interested in those, we'd be very happy to work with them and provide more information. But in the meantime, we've got the ones that Elle in the team has designed up, so hopefully they'll be very useful for people. I'd be interested on feedback on that as well, if anyone's got anything that they wanted to come back on. You may be aware, last month there was a Westminster Hall debate hosted by Jess Brown-Fellows, Chichester MP. It was called Transport in the South East, which was a bit confusing for us initially. But it was an opportunity for some of our region's MPs to talk about strategic transport issues in the South East. And they covered things like the A27, London, Gatwick, Kent, and the Croydon Rail bottleneck, plus Isle of Wight ferries. Although a lot of it did centre around potholes and road maintenance discussions, as you'd expect. Although there was a reply from Minister Lillian Greenwood at the end of it, so it was good to get at least the area out there and get some ministerial awareness of what some of the challenges are that we've got. We did follow up the meeting with an email to her from the chairman, just to say this is just a reminder of some of the work that we've done on those topics, just to sort of put it out there again. They didn't actually mention us in the discussion, which was disappointing, but we made sure that we wanted to follow up to say that all the work that we've done in the area. And similarly, Mark Vallely and I met the Secretariat from the new APBG, the Gatwick Diamond APBG, a few weeks ago. They're interested in views on integrated transport, so we fed back some of the... well, actually, Mark did a great job in terms of providing a bit of a good story about our evidence base and the strategy work that we've done. And we've offered to provide some assistance to them. Actually, we saw one of the Secretariat in Victoria on our way here today, so he did say, I owe you an email, so I'm interested to see what that might entail. And then just finally a few stats, digital stats that we've got. So we did an audit on our website, and it showed that about 92% of visitors were new over the past 12 months, sorry, which is partly a result of our social media activity, plus the additional traffic from the transport strategy as well. Our Connections newsletter, tomorrow's out, sorry, the next one's out tomorrow, a bit of exclusive there. We had a 41% open rate in December, which is higher than our usual rate. That was the summary of the year. I don't know if anyone remembers that one, but it was a slightly different approach to what we normally did. But it was refreshing just to see that there was still a market for something slightly different. So Elle and I are going to look at ways that we can develop the Connections newsletter over the coming year. And then finally, LinkedIn. We've had a bit of a bumper session on LinkedIn recently. So we've had nearly 50 followers in the last 30 days. New followers, should I say. We put a target of 1,500 for 25-26, and now we've got 1,541. So that's quite a nice increase. A lot of that was down to the rail strategy and the Channel Tunnel story about being open to freight, which we put out a few weeks ago. That knocked us over the 1,500. And then Elle did some great work to mark International Women's Day with a series of posts last weekend, I think it was. And I think Laura is on the call. She was one of those people that we that sent in some information for that. And her post actually is our biggest ever number in terms of responses. We had 119 likes for that, which is the most we've ever had. So thank you to Laura, and also thank you to everyone else that worked with Elle to produce that. So that's it for me. Thank you. If there are any questions?
Anybody? No? Thank you very much indeed. Question free. And thanks again to all those who've contributed to make this happen as well. It's obviously another, we talked about organic growth of this sort of thing. It's happening here as well as with our Centre of Excellence as well. So this is really exciting to see the parallel growth there going on. Thank you very much indeed. We're up to the last couple of items. 18, any other business that anyone has? I've got one from Rupert here.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to thank yourself and other members for their support during the year. I know some members will be going to elections. I wish them well with that. For those that aren't going to elections, Councillor Dennis, thank you so much for your support over the time that you've been here and your support on Audit and Governance Committee. It's been fantastic. Also, just to remind members that the meeting on the 13th of July, it's really important that's an in-person. The Constitution requires it to be an in-person meeting. It's the annual meeting. So it's the appointment of the chairman, vice chairman, co-opted members, and the like. And the Constitution requires that it's done in person. So just to remind you on that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I've got no other business. So date of next meeting, as Rupert says, the 13th of July. Huge thanks to all the team who brought us together today and to all members of the board for this. To quote what I think is the greatest poet of the 20th century, Bob Dylan, times they are a-changing, actually. We've got a lot of new faces going to be coming in and people who are now moving on, and we're really grateful for everything they've contributed. But what we have got a responsibility to do as a board and to reflect the work of the staff is to keep up the very high standard of work that we've seen over the last few years. Certainly I've seen since I've joined here. That's a responsibility we have to support that high standard, maintain the quality of work that I've certainly seen. So it's on our shoulders.
Chairman, if I may, I forgot something like I should have said. And Keir, just to thank Keir. He's been with us for just over 2 years. He came as a sort of fairly, policy person from DFT. We all know that can be quite challenging. I hope we are sending him back a far more rounded individual back into the department. But I'm really grateful for the work he's led over the last 2 years. It's been fantastic having him as part of the team. He's done some great stuff with the Business Advisory Group. I mean, that's a really great example of how we've pulled business together and work with Jeff and the Transport Forum and wider as well. I will miss him. The team will miss him. And it's just to say, Chairman, that I should have mentioned it earlier. I completely forgot. But it's to thank him for his time with us.
No, thanks very much. Yeah, we reiterate those comments. It's been a real pleasure. So thank you so much. Right. If there's nothing else, I'll draw the meeting to a close. Thank you everyone online as well for joining us. I know it's been fairly quiet, but it's good to see you there. And hopefully we'll be all here in person on in the July meeting.